Hi, and welcome to today's Jungle's Musings. The topic today is abundance, the most important conversation that women and girls can lead today. In case you haven't noticed, this world we live in has a consciousness of lack and scarcity. And news is there is plenty. There is actually plenty. There is plenty. What we have here is a mentality, a lack and scarcity mentality. Yes, humans perhaps have mismanaged resources, but there is plenty. And you know, the conversation really goes beyond just whether or not physically on this plane called planet Earth is there enough resources to feed humankind, but also it's a consciousness. When you live in a conversation, a mass conversation and belief system of lack and scarcity, it's not just about resources. It's a consciousness that impacts human beings all the way around, as in there's not enough of everything, not enough love, that we're not enough, like good enough, well enough, happy enough, enough love, enough friends, enough attention, enough, like enoughness. Not enoughness is lack and scarcity consciousness. The conversation that can make the biggest difference on this planet right now to be led is a conversation for abundance consciousness. Abundance consciousness. The first time that I was exposed to this conversation was in my 20s and my mid 20s, and thank God for that because of what I had been through growing up. The lack and scarcity conversation of parents that were raised in part in the Depression era, and the overall consciousness on this planet of lack and scarcity was huge back when I was being raised, especially in my family of origin. So just to give you a glimpse of what that looked like, when I was a teenager, my father had his first major heart attack. My mom had actually filed for a divorce and they were separated. At the time, my mom decided no, they were going to get back together. She was going to try again, and he wanted to try again too. It didn't go so well. It didn't go well at all, and so pretty quickly, my mom let us know, me and my brothers, who were teenagers at the time, that when we were grown and out of the house, that she was going to be filing for another divorce, and she warned us and planned us and prepared us from that time forward that when she did divorce our dad and take half his money, that he would die of his second heart attack, and that would be how it would go. And guess what? That is exactly how it went. She filed for a divorce. There was a lot of money involved. It took 1.5 years before the judge finally said, this is how it's going to be divided up. My mom came home from court. She said, it's done. And a week later, my dad died of his second and final heart attack. Why do I tell that story? It's a horrific story. It's a horrible story, but it's true. It's true, and it makes a point. Sometimes it's the most extreme examples that are best to use for making a point. That came out of lack and scarcity consciousness. And that is what I was raised in. I remember when I was a child and I would be jumping on the trampoline, and of course we had 2 trampolines in our backyard, not 1 but 2. And when we'd be jumping on the trampoline, you get out of breath, and then we'd fall down on the trampoline and lay on our backs, and I would find myself expanding into abundance consciousness. Now back then I didn't know what it was, but it's a certain experience. It's not an intellectual, mental type of thing. It's an experiential, like visceral kind of thing, laying on the trampoline, looking up at the sky long enough and watching clouds float by, to getting extremely expanded, knowing, wow, this is definitely an abundant universe. The other times I would have experiences like this as a child was when I would be swimming at Lake Conroe. We would stay up there all summer long at our lake house, and I was a swimmer. And so what I would do is I would go out and to one cove at Lake Conroe, and I would swim all the way around to the next cove and get out and before I would get out, of course, I would do one of my favorite things, which is I've already had gotten my breathing going and I'm like, yeah, so it's time to float. And so I would float. And that experience would get me into an expanded state. Again, I had no idea what an expanded state was back then. I had no idea what abundance consciousness was back in those days. But I want to tell you something. Swimming, getting the breathing deep, and then floating on Lake Conroe, looking up into the sky, was an experience of expansion, of abundance consciousness. This is an abundant universe that we live in. And by leading the conversation for abundance consciousness, we will soon, someday, have children on this planet who do not already get raised in lack and scarcity, and not only lack and scarcity, but with a belief that they're not enough. Instead, they will get raised with a belief that they are plenty enough, smart enough, lovable enough, whole and complete enough, and with plenty of opportunities in the world for them to embark on in their lifetime. So we can end wars, we can end hunger on this planet. All we need to do is shift the current consciousness from that of lack and scarcity to that of abundance consciousness. And women being half the population roughly, we are the perfect people to lead this conversation. And with that, as usual, I'd like to ask you, if you did get something out of this message, would you please share it with your friends and like it? And until next time,